All right, everyone. I think we're going to get rolling. I think we got everyone on. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Retool at Scale event. We're all super excited to have you all here today as we explore how we unblock the enterprise software development at scale so all your teams can innovate faster. My name is Ghazi Masood. I'm Retool's Chief Revenue Officer based out of Seattle, Washington, actually just outside of Seattle in Bellevue. It's actually a lovely day here. Not raining. As you can see, the sun is shining, but that will probably change, I'm sure, a little bit later today. We've got a fantastic agenda prepared for you today. So let me kind of run through that agenda for everyone. For those of you who are hearing about Retool for the very first time, I'm going to kick off and spend about just 2 minutes giving you an overview to get you all grounded, a little bit about who Retool is. So just 2 minutes on that. And then I'm very pleased to be sharing the stage with our good friend Chunying Wang, a senior engineering leader at Pinterest, who is joining me today to share how Pinterest has standardized on internal tools for hundreds of their developers and over 1,000 end users. So we're going to be spending time with Chunying and really learning about how his team is truly innovating as they build product at scale and app development best practices at Pinterest. And I've got several questions for Chunying today. We'll dig into that. And then we'll also open the floor for some live questions so you can join in on the conversation. So after the interview with Chunying, we're going to hand it up to Jenny and Taylor from our Retool engineering and product teams, who will join in as we explore what an ideal state looks like to build custom software and operational software at an enterprise. After that, you'll get a closer look at Retool's enterprise platform and learn how Retool can fit into your stack to empower your line of business teams to create exactly the tools that everyone needs. And then from there, we'll share a sneak preview of enterprise learning events where you'll find experts of insights driving applications of development at scale. And then towards the end, I think we'll also leave some time to answer some live questions before the chat, before we wrap up. All right, is everyone ready to roll? Thumbs up? All right, let's dive into it. So for those of you that aren't aware, I'm just going to take a few minutes just to kind of run through this. So Retool is a platform for building business software. You can think of us as a set of Lego building blocks for a full stack platform to build operational software for pretty much any kind of use case. With the Retool, you get super highly flexible drag and drop app builders where you can build custom UIs on top of your data, as well as support for mobile apps for field teams. We also provide backend logic with workflows, a database for storage, and even external client portals that many of our customers build. We've been fortunate enough to see Retool across many large enterprise organizations such as Amazon, DoorDash, American Express, and several of the largest companies in the world who've really trusted us to do even more with them over the years. So we're extremely fortunate to serve the very large enterprise client base around the world. With the Retool, our mission is to build software much faster. You can read and write your own data sources and APIs. You can use drag and drop functionality interface with pre-built components to design basically any application. And we've got a lot of our customers that basically hack Retool anywhere with JavaScript, Python, and SQL. And most importantly, we safely roll up your own apps to production for thousands of users. So if you look at our customer base that we actually have, we have customers that use us in smaller applications. Then we have customers like Pinterest and many others who kind of use us across thousands and thousands of users across the enterprise. So we'll chat a bit about that. And then today, we're going to talk a bit about what it means to build fast without sacrificing security, reliability, and consistency. Because the reality is, as many of you all know, if you kind of look under the hood of internal applications at nearly any enterprise company, the story's pretty much the same, right? You see things like tool sprawl, tech debt, code that's perhaps left behind by someone who's left the organizations from a few years ago. We truly believe here at Retool that an enterprise-grade approach to building internal software needs to be both efficient to develop and also built to last. We talk a lot about efficiency here at Retool. And today, we're also going to be talking about how to empower building in a scalable way by default. But before we get into the details of the Retool platform, let me welcome Chun Ying to the virtual stage so we can dive a bit around Chun Ying and Pinterest. So Chun Ying, welcome.
Hi, Gizzy.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing well.
How are you? Where are you joining us from today?
From the Bay Area, California.
Fantastic, fantastic. So we're going to just spend a few minutes and talk a bit about yourself and Pinterest. Before we get rolling here, why don't you introduce yourself to the team and tell us and everyone your role at Pinterest?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me to be part of your event. For myself, I've been working at Pinterest for the last 10 plus years. I'm currently leading our data infrastructure and analytical tooling platform teams.
Fantastic. Awesome, awesome, awesome. All right, well, let's dive into it. First up, would you mind sharing some of the challenges you faced at Pinterest that led you to kind of look at Retool in the first place?
Yeah, definitely. So for Pinterest, one of the key focus area for us is really about the productivity of our teams. And the reason it's important for us is it gives productivity. We think of it as giving us the leverage to compete against some of the much larger companies in the space. And so we've been running the internal productivity survey for the last 5 or 6 years. And almost 6 months, we would ask our internal team what would they think as the biggest blocker to unlock their productivity or prohibit them from doing like 200% of their job. And so, and about 3 to 4 years back, and this is before we onboarded the Retool, the most frequent theme we hear from the internal team has been around the gaps in tooling. Right? If we look at, for example, the engineer, their complaint is really they don't have the necessary tools to get their day-to-day job being productive. And for the engineering team, their challenge is that it took a lot of effort, a lot of boilerplate changes for teams to be able to even get the tool up and running. It takes weeks. And also the learning curve is somewhat steep, right? If it's a full stack engineer, people have to get refreshed with JavaScript. And so that's when about 3 years ago, we started to look into the space, how to solve this productivity challenge. And that's fortunately when Retool came up.
That's great. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. What about like if you were to look at just a few different ways your teams kind of use Retool today, like specifically like how are they using Retool and kind of what applications?
Yeah, it's I would say it's really used across our teams, and so from the infrastructure side, for example, teams using it for infrastructure monitoring, for control plane, to monitor, for example, our Spark job status, to configure the cluster, and decide how, for example, to ramp up or ramp down the cluster at scale. And also, if you look at the core and the engagement side on the user side, we have a lot of Retool apps that developed for our operations team to, for example, review the content for risky content and the spam moderation to ensure that our pinners have a safe and trusted environment. And then if you look at the monetization sales, we also have a lot of apps that are serving for our sales team to, for example, identify upsell opportunity and monitor the campaign performance to drive the revenue for our company. So it's really used across the company, across the board.
Got it. That's great. So you mentioned sales as end users. If you were to kind of describe some of the different builders and users across the applications, like what teams would you say really kind of comprise the usage of from builders and even users?
Yeah, that's a great question. For us, the users is really across the company. So whether it's engineers, product managers, data scientists, sales, community operations, they've been all benefiting and using Retool as part of their integrated day-to-day job. And in terms of builders, I think one of the most exciting thing for us to see was that it's not just the engineers using Retool. We also see a lot of the non-engineering functions like product managers, data scientists, and they are leveraging Retool to build some of the apps and get their productivity unlocked through self-serve.
That's great. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. So if I remember correctly, you had some existing React-based internal tooling prior to engaging with Retool. Can you share a bit about how you approach the integration of these with Retool?
Yeah, so we basically, for us, if we dial back 4 or 5 years ago, we have a legacy technical stack, our internal tooling platform that's primarily based on Django and JavaScript. And that platform doesn't really help much in terms of helping our developers, taking away the boilerplate changes or providing the common UX library for teams to develop apps. And so for us, what happened was that in order, when we onboard Retool, we listed out what are some of the most commonly used internal services that Retool would be frequently talking to. For example, a lot of the apps would require the access to the data layer or issue Presto or Spark SQL queries. And what we did was that we basically provide a list of well-documented endpoint and abstract a lot of our internal services behind those endpoint for Retool to integrate with those services, so that whether if it's the builder from our engineering side or non-engineering side, they could leverage those endpoints and start to get their app rolling at the fastest speed when they're starting to use Retool.
That's great. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I mean, it's really, really exciting over the last few years. Like, you've scaled to dozens of applications, building, that are really built with Retool across really thousands of your employees, right? Which is just fantastic to see the growth. Would you mind just taking a little bit of time and talking a bit about how you've incorporated Retool across like your internal tech stack?
Yeah. And so besides what I just mentioned, like maybe having the list of endpoint that's well documented and ready. One thing I think that worked particularly well was that we partnershiped with Retool very early on. And then for us, for example, security and data privacy is a big requirement. And so we spend a lot of effort working with your team on the integration part to make sure that we can have AAA set up between Retool, and that can reliably talk to of the different Pinterest internal services and endpoint. The services are abstracted away from basically the Retool, but the API can be well accessed. And so that's basically for our user when they are starting to build apps on Retool, this kind of API integration that takes away of the abstract away most of the complexity from the end users.
That's great. That's fantastic. And then, obviously you've grown with us dramatically over the years, right? Would you mind sharing a bit about how you approach scaling with Retool and how it's impacted your teams across Pinterest?
Yeah. For scaling, when I think about it, there are probably several different phases. At the initial phase, we worked with your team to start the pilot with like 1 or 2 teams. We identified the trust and safety use case and worked with your team to make sure that team is really successful. The initial 5 or 10 apps that we sort of kind of use it as a pilot to make sure that all these other services are well integrated with the Retool, and the app is up the quality bar that is smooth to be used by the internal other customers who are using those apps. And then once that gets started rolling, naturally, I think there's kind of an organic adoption that was happening when other teams, they saw like our trust and safety team, they were building these cool apps with Retool. They naturally gravitated toward trying to learning more, trying to kind of asking about how could they get access to Retool, and then start to onboard the platform. And then that's kind of helped us with the initial scaling. For the second part, the second phase, kind of when we try to push it out to the company wide, we sort of partner with Retool a lot in terms of picking back on some of the internal events. And for example, like for the hackathons, we had a generative AI hackathon about 3 months ago. And then we sort of use those opportunity and invite Retool team to host the education session with our engineering team before those hackathon to make sure that our internal employees they learn about Retool, they know how to kind of build the Retool app. And that I think that was kind of went really well. The generative hackathon, we saw both engineers and engineers, they were starting to use Retool to build out a lot of the cool AI ideas, and that was really successful. So kind of the initial phase, organic scaling, the second phase, focus on education, and then kind of partnership on some of those internal events to spread the word.
That's great. Yeah, I remember you sounds like your team got a lot of value from the internal hackathons that you all did over there. So that's fantastic. Great. Just a few more other questions. You know, during your growth, how have you empowered your teams to kind of get started on Retool on their own? Kind of just basically kind of learning on their own and kind of building on their own. What have you kind of done at Pinterest over there with that?
Yeah, so besides what I just mentioned about some of the education sessions during the hackathon, one other thing I think that was really helpful is around the documentation. At Pinterest, you know, we are kind of we have a few thousand employees. For us to be really able to scale well is through documentation and wiki. Internally, we classify our documentation into several different categories. And for example, there's tutorials to teach the first time users, for example, how to onboard to Retool. What are some of the core functionalities? What are some of the key commonly used API endpoints? And then we also compensate those documentation with how-to guides. That's where, for example, if people are having some issue developing or some frequently issues that come up during the development phase, we want to make sure that we are capturing and preserving the knowledge base and make sure that whoever, if they are interested in building a Retool app, they have all these documentations that are ready for them. And on top of that, we also have a very good internal support, and it's also largely thanks kudos to your team, Gazi, you know, Anchor, Ryan. They have been really extremely helpful. We have a joint hosted Slack channel that are providing 24/7 support to our internal developers. That I think gives a lot of confidence and peace of mind for developers that in case if they have some issue that they couldn't solve, you know, there's a strong team, that's their support team there that could support and solve their problems.
That's great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that. So as you can see, you know, we've got a number of enterprise customers joining us today from all over the world. Any thoughts you want to share on how to leverage Retool for those who are just getting started?
Yeah, I think probably there are 2 points I could share. The first is that you know, we try to be upfront with you about our needs since the very beginning of the partnership. Right, we as a company, we kind of put a lot of index about the privacy, protecting the privacy of our pinners, and so we kind of and we also care a lot about like infrastructure efficiency, and so we being able to articulate those requirements to you early on, and your team I think really did a phenomenal job helping us, for example, in the early days, making sure that we have those privacy compliance, those required security controls in place. And so that kind of greatly, I think, smooths out the adoption curve later on, basically helped us solve a lot of the issue upfront.
Okay, great. Fantastic. Fantastic.
Yeah, and the second thing I want to share is that I think it was really helpful that we start off at the beginning of this partnership. We try to set our vision for the longer run. We build out kind of a 2 to 3 year roadmap, envisioning where we would want to be 2 to 3 years down the road. And we kind of carve out into different milestones. For example, the first 6 months is to work with you on piloting with 1 or 2 teams and make sure it's well integrated, teams are seeing the value. And then the next phase, we kind of index on basically a one-time migration to move off of those legacy tooling, our legacy tooling platform to Retool. And then if we look at even beyond further, there are like basically a set of features or key milestones we want to address. So I think having that kind of 2 to 3 year roadmap upfront at the beginning, it helps us build a longer term vision and make sure that it's we have a long term engagement partnership that's valuable for the long run.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, thanks for that. Last question before we kind of get into some fun here. Where would you like to see Retool invest next?
Yeah, I mean, first I would want to say, we've been really appreciative of all the quick turnaround in terms of whenever we come up with a new feature request or something, Ryan, Anchor, and your team, it really like gives us phenomenal support and have a really fast, quick turnaround in terms of addressing our requirement. So huge kudos to our team for that. I mean, if I have a magic band, I think one of the things that, as someone who manage our internal tooling platform on behalf of the rest of the Pinterest team, I think one of the areas we'd love to see more investment is probably around the tool cataloging and the metadata management. As you can imagine, we're currently getting to a stage where we have hundreds of apps that build across the company on top of Retool. And sometimes it's a little bit difficult for us to figure out, for example, which stage is this tool at in their life cycle? Is it a tool that's close to be kind of sunsetted, or is it something that's kind of still like being actively used? So I think if there's could be more metadata management and providing showcasing, it could not just help our internal team to be easy to manage those tools, but also hopefully it helps different other parts of the organization. They can learn about these cool apps that other teams build, and then to realize even more value from the Retool apps that other teams have been building.
That's great. That's great. Awesome. Well, we'll definitely take note of that. We appreciate that. All right. All right. We're going to kind of move here to what we call kind of the lightning round. So you ready, Chunyan? I'm going to fire away some rapid questions to you.
Sounds good.
All right. Favorite Retool component?
I'm from a data background, so chart is my favorite component.
Okay. JavaScript or SQL?
SQL.
Your favorite Pinterest board?
I have a Pinterest board that's for kind of collection of different kind of skis.
Ah, okay, cool. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Cool. Very apropos as we're getting into winter. Awesome. All right. Well, Chunyan, thank you so much for the answers to my questions. Really, really appreciate it. I think we're going to pivot here. I think we're going to pivot to the live audience Q&A. We have about 5 minutes where we'll take about some questions on the chat window. So give me a minute to move over there and we'll see what kind of questions came in. All right. So the first one here is, how long did it take you to migrate and how long did it take to skill people on it and from an onboarding and getting it functional?
Yeah, for us, In terms of scaling it, the first pilot, we probably, I think it was pretty quickly. We could get Retool integrated up and running, and for the teams to start building apps on top of Retool. It probably take about, I would say, 2 to 3 months. Of course, there are like some further tweaks and features that we have to address down the road, but the initial integration happened very quickly. And then it take about, for example, for the first use case, the pilot use case took about 2 to 3 months, just because we have a lot of other internal services to integrate. And so I would say kind of probably somewhere between 1 to 4 months, depending on how complex it is with your internal tech stack. For Pinterest, as you could imagine, we have hundreds of internal services. And so that's where I think a majority of the time was spent in terms of the initial onboarding. For us to migrate over from the existing apps, we have about 60 or so apps, internal apps before Retool. And it took us about 8 months or so this year, working with a different tooling owner to migrate off those existing apps to Retool. And for that, I mean, the reason it took 8 months is less about, for example, the engineering time. Onboarding a Retool app is relatively easy. It usually takes about 2 to 3 weeks for a team to migrate their app. The majority of the time is because we have to, all those apps they're owned by like 10 or 15 different teams internally. So we have to work with them, sequencing it. And that's kind of where majority of the time have been spent on.
That's great. Awesome, awesome. So I know that you've grown into the platform and scaled with Retool over the years. How big is the team, the engineering team of like the folks that are maintaining the Retool apps?
Yeah, we actually, it's a 3-person team for the internal tooling platform. And if we have to allocate the time we actually spend on Retool, is probably, I think, around 1 person.
Awesome. So very, very small team that can actually get by. That's awesome. Like, I mean, you know, given your scale and how you're using it, having a very small team dedicated to it, that kind of just shows the power of the platform. So fantastic. Are you using Retool on-prem or cloud?
So the way we deploy is we took a Docker image from you and then deployed using our own AWS account, our own AWS environment.
Awesome. Fantastic. And like you said, I think you've got a small team dedicated to Retool building and support, which is great. There's one more question that came in from the chat. Do you have any recommendations for managing database internal access, security, and privacy as teams grow? And could you talk a bit more about these aspects from a privacy and security standpoint?
Yeah. So it's an area that we collaborated with Retool team quite a lot. For us internally, we have a fine-grained access control system where we could grant access to a particular data set based on the role or the user group of the user. And then what we did with the Retool partnership is we make sure that the fine-grained access control system is integrated with the Retool part. For Retool, each user, when they are using the app, whether if it's building the app or accessing the app, based on their LDAP role, that would send to our fine-grained access control data layer, and then we would do authentication or authorization based on the user identity.
Got it. Got it. One more question. Has your team leveraged any of the Retool AI capabilities that we recently just launched? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that's very exciting for us. We got a preview from Anthony, our CTO, in the early days, like when you started to even kind of think about some of those AI features. And so some of the functionalities, like for example, text to SQL, using AI to easily build tools, those have been like really powerful for us, and we're definitely like very excited about those features.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right, Chunyan, I think that's it. I want to really, really thank you for your time and your thoughtful answers and bearing with me as we kind of went through the questions. Really, really appreciate all your continued support and for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right. Fantastic. All right, folks. So we are going to move forward in our regularly scheduled programming, and we're going to transition to Jenny Shaw, who will map out the ideal development stack when building operational enterprise software. So Jenny, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Ghazi, and thank you. There we go. Hey, everyone. My favorite Pinterest board is all of the wedding boards. I could not have planned my wedding without Pinterest. So thank you, Jun Young and the Pinterest team for all of the work that you do there. So yeah, I'm Jenny Shaw. I lead our sales or solutions engineering organization here at Retool. And you just heard from Pinterest about how they use Retool to not just speed up their internal tool development, but scale this development across the entire company. We want to talk to you today about how we think about building business tooling at scale in the more general sense, where Retool fits into this picture, and then introduce some of the new features that we're working on that are going to further facilitate this. Every enterprise today is really a software company. And this is because software lets you reach and engage with customers effectively. It lets you operate smoothly, scale and multiply your teams quickly. And software is what can enable you to innovate faster and differentiate over your competitors. Our thesis is that there's a broad subset of tools that every company needs, where the comparative advantage is what gets built, what it lets you do, and how quickly it can evolve with the business. Some problems require massive scale, tight controls, high redundant systems, and others require spreadsheets. And when it comes to building this software, there's a constant tension between, do you build it fast or do you build it with the right foundations to scale? Empowering people to build faster is exactly why we built Retool. We understood the value of removing tedious engineering work, especially for internal tooling. We've seen teams build software in the matter of days or weeks instead of months. So the advantages are obvious. You deliver more tooling with fewer resources, spend less time on undifferentiated projects, and you iterate and evolve quickly. But there can be problems with moving really fast as well. You can have tool sprawl and shadow IT by employees that just want to find their own solutions to get things done quickly. And this leads to lack of security and unmaintainable or non-centralized software. The other side of the spectrum is control and building for scale, which involves building with formal review processes, approvals, permissionings to avoid accidental breaking changes. But there's problems with control too. You can have too much control, which then means you have a cockpit of buttons, which leads to user error when doing setup. You have development bottlenecks, provisioning bottlenecks, and there can be data silos. Good platforms let you slow down so you can get more control, or they let you move faster and give up some of that control. Great platforms, however, are more like an F1 race car. They allow you to have both speed and control turned all the way up. You likely already know how Retool helps you build quickly, but I'm excited to introduce Taylor now, who's going to walk you through how Retool helps you build the right foundations to scale.
Hi, everybody, and thank you, Jenny. I'm Taylor. I'm on the product team here at Retool, and I'm excited to show you some of the latest capabilities that we've rolled out with the Retool platform to make it even easier to achieve this level of security, maintainability, reliability, scalability, and consistency across everything you build on Retool that Jenny is describing. But first, I want to talk about that word platform. I feel like the word platform gets thrown around these days in so many different contexts, and it's used to mean so many different things. When it comes to Retool specifically, though, I like to think about Retool as really two kind of different but connected parts. So first, we have this suite of visual-first builder tools that you're probably familiar with if you've used Retool yourself. These are our flagship application builder, our native mobile app builder, our backend workflows builder, our database and storage builder, and then other builder tools alongside those. But then underneath and kind of cutting across all these different builder tools is what I like to call our platform. So these are the features that help you build on Retool in a scalable and maintainable way. So features for developers like source control, environments, releases, and more. And then also features that help you administer Retool. So meaning managing things like user accounts, like permissions, like audit logging, single sign-on, etc. So I want to talk today specifically about a few very recent additions to the platform that speak in particular to that second point, that ability to administer and govern Retool seamlessly from a single small team to hundreds of teams building apps for thousands of end users. So I'll go through a few of these brand new features and show you what I'm talking about. So I'll start with a feature we're calling Spaces. So many Retool customers, including Pinterest that you just heard from, choose to self-host Retool. So we provide a set of Docker images that you can then deploy an instance of Retool within your own VPC that gives you full control over where your data goes. Having this kind of centralized instance of Retool has a number of benefits from an organizational perspective. So by deploying just one piece of new infrastructure, you can let many different teams deploy apps on top without having to go back to DevOps and get new compute provision for every new application that you want to deploy. You can also set up integrations to important data sources just once. And then these many different teams can take advantage of those connections in the app they build. You also get centralized audit logs, you get centralized analytics. Sometimes though, especially in larger organizations, you need a degree of separation between these different teams. So you likely have teams in totally different parts of the company working on completely different things. And these teams probably don't each need their own dedicated infrastructure, but they probably should administer their apps that they're building and invite users and create permission roles themselves within the context of their particular team and what they are building for their team. So they should probably have their own Git repo. They probably need some of their own data resources. And maybe at a certain scale, you want to set up an internal chargeback system to account for different departments' usage of the platform. So this is where the new Spaces feature that was just released as a beta comes in. So Spaces lets you create isolated Retool development environments for different teams or projects on top of shared underlying infrastructure. So if you're self-hosting Retool on your own VPC, you can think of Spaces as giving you this truly multi-tenant platform, but that's totally under your control and totally in your own cloud. So this might be useful for separating different teams from one another, as I just described. This might also be useful for separating different apps or use cases from one another. And it might be useful for separating different applications that you actually distribute to your own clients or franchisees or customers from each other. And then a lot more ways that you can use Spaces. So how does Spaces actually work? So say you're building a new set of apps on Retool for your support team. So after spinning up a Retool instance, you can now go into settings, into Retool settings, and create a new space. So a new space gets its own name, it gets its own subdomain, and then you can also optionally copy over your SSO configuration and themes from your admin space to make sure everything stays consistent. You can then invite users to be admins of this new space. So rather than having a single central admin for all of Retool across your entire company, you might want to delegate administration for this particular new space to, say, the leads on the support team who we are creating this space for. End users then can have access to one or multiple spaces. So a user can be invited directly to a space, or they can be provisioned automatically by your SSO provider. And then a user can switch between different spaces that they have accounts on via this convenient dropdown in the top right. So we see Spaces as a way to scale Retool broadly and securely, centralizing governance while decentralizing development, all while minimizing the DevOps cycles and controlling and amortizing infrastructure costs across all the different teams that are using Retool. So Spaces, like I mentioned, is available on the latest Retool release as an opt-in beta today. And we've also published a set of best practices for taking advantage of Spaces depending on how your particular organization operates. So next is permissions. So permissions are a really critical part of the Retool platform, really convenient part of the Retool platform too. You can set up a permission once, or a set of permissions once, or a set of permissions groups once, and then have them apply across everything that gets built on Retool. Spaces that we just talked about makes permissions a lot more flexible. So now you have a new way to delegate permission management and administration to individual teams and departments. Today, though, we're also rolling out another major extension to the Retool permission system, which is resource environment permissions. So as we all know, data is the lifeblood of every modern business. And if you boil down internal tools, the thing that Retool was designed to help you build, if you boil down those internal tools to their essence, they're really just about giving the right data access to the right person at the right time. And so through that lens, Retool sits in this very powerful point in your stack. You can connect a bunch of different resources to Retool, and then you can make it really easy for app builders to create tools to act on this data. The challenge, of course, is you want to make sure that no matter what gets built, it only provides the right data to the right end users at the right time. So say, for example, you're building your support dashboards now in your new space. These dashboards will let you view and act on data about specific customers by connecting to a central customer account database. You probably have 3 or so different versions of this database corresponding to different environments. So you have a development version that has dummy data to be used just while the apps are being developed. You have a QA version that has realistic but anonymized data for use in QA as you test the apps. And then you have a production version that has actually the real customer data. Your development team should probably only be able to access the dev environment of the database. Your QA team should probably only be able to access the QA environment. And then your support team actually using the apps should only be able to access the prod environment. So this is where Retool's new resource environment permissions come in. So just like it sounds, these let you enforce permissions that I just described at the resource and environment level in Retool directly in the platform. So you've got your customer account database connected to Retool as a resource. In Retool's settings, you can now give the development team role the use permission for the dev environment of that resource. And you can give the QA team role the use permission on the QA environment for that resource, and the support team the use permission for the prod environment of that resource. So if a member of the development team now tries to run a query against the resource in a prod environment, in any app that's built anywhere across Retool, that query will fail. So for resources that have an authorization scheme that is shared across all end users, like a database, this gives you a way to enforce much more granular access at the Retool level. So spaces and permissions together give you lots of ways to set up Retool governance across a large organization. But what I just showed involved a lot of clicks. So we deeply appreciate that clicking through a UI to configure settings is inherently not a scalable way to manage a tool within a large business. So much so that we actually have a rallying cry here, which is death to ClickOps. So being able to scale something requires being able to automate and script that thing, which by today, we're also rolling out a number of new ways that you can automate how you govern the Retool platform. Starting with our new platform API. So with the platform API, you'll be able to create and manage users, user groups, and permissions. You'll be able to create, list, and delete spaces. You'll be able to configure things like source control, SSO, and app themes on a space, and a lot more. And we'll be continuing to roll out new API endpoints as they're built. So our ultimate goal is for anything that you can configure on the settings page within Retool to be configurable via API. So you can check out the docs today and start using these API endpoints on our enterprise plan. We're also giving you more ways to hook more deeply into the user lifecycle within Retool. So we know that Retool doesn't exist in a vacuum. When you add a new user to Retool, it's probably part of a larger process that's happening behind the scenes. So maybe you onboarded a new employee and want to send them information from your center of excellence on how to get the most out of Retool. Or maybe you're adding a new franchisee to your portal and need to send a fully branded bespoke welcome email instead of Retool's default one. So we're rolling out a new feature called Retool Actions. So this lets you, this introduces a set of new Retool specific triggers when specific user actions occur. So for example, you can hook into when a new user signs up or triggers the forgot password flow and replace Retool's default emails with your own totally custom ones. Or along with our new API endpoints, you can run a workflow that automatically creates a new folder and sets a new permission group when a user accepts an invite to a Retool space. We are also introducing a new way to add metadata about each user directly within the Retool platform with user attributes. So when you're building a Retool app, it can be useful to be able to reference certain information about the end user who is using that app to control the behavior of the app. So for example, you might want to check whether an end user is a member of the support managers group before showing them a button that lets them edit information about a customer. User attributes takes this a step further. So now you can define totally custom metadata about each Retool user that any app can then use to run logic in a secure and unspoofable way. So for example, you might want to set the zip code that a user is located in to then show them only information that is relevant to their particular location. These user attributes can be set on specific Retool users from within the settings UI, but of course, they can also be set automatically using our platform APIs. So between spaces and resource environment permissions and the platform APIs and user actions and user attributes, you can kind of start to see how all of these different things would all come together to let you create a really powerful, really scalable governance structure. So you could build an app that lets teams request new spaces. From there, you could call the API to create a new space. You could then trigger a workflow to provision user accounts and send custom welcome emails. You can then programmatically assign those users when they accept their invite to the right roles and give those roles specific environment permissions, et cetera, et cetera. All of this totally automatic, totally flexible, auditable, and repeatable. So this is just the beginning. A lot of what we shared today centered on automating how you govern Retool to make the platform itself more scalable. But we're also working on a bunch of new features to make the apps you build themselves more scalable and maintainable, including features like testing in CI/CD, deeper observability, and a lot more. So we are just scratching the surface of what's possible with Retool's platform today. And we've got some really interesting events coming up to talk more about all of this, specifically designed for technical leaders who want to go a level deeper. So on November 29th, we are hosting a session covering how to build a foundation for a long-term tooling strategy. So this will be hosted by Julie Chen, who is a deployed engineer at Retool, who works very closely with many, many different teams who all are working on building internal tools at companies of all kinds of different sizes. And she will share some of the best practices that she has seen for setting up application guardrails, for building a scalable governance model, for creating documentation centers of excellence, and a lot more. And then on December 13th, we will be holding a session all about modernizing your tech stack. So we all deal with those outdated systems that have hung around for far too long. And the hardest question to answer sometimes is, when is this worth replacing? And so Anthony Bello, who is a product manager here at Retool, will draw on his professional experience both working at and now alongside large enterprises to weigh those benefits and costs of modernizing a tech stack, and the approaches that he has seen when it comes to digital transformations that actually have successfully improved business operations. So with that, I will pass it back to Jenny to kick off our live Q&A.
Great. Thank you, Taylor. Yeah, so we've had a few questions come through the chat, so I'm just going to start at the top. Has anyone used this for B2B healthcare, complex rules, data, and migrated off a tech stack to this? Yes, we actually have quite a few healthcare customers right now using Retool, to the point where we've realized that there's been a lot of success here. And so if you go to our website, and we could also follow up with you as well, but you could book a demo, and we could show you some of the healthcare demos that we've built. And it doesn't necessarily need to be that you have to migrate your entire tech stack off of what you're currently doing onto Retool. We can connect into your current databases, current systems that you have, and you can kind of use Retool as kind of this layer that allows you to bring all of your tech stack together to easily build tooling. The next question here is about how to scale Retool if you're moving this to a B2C use case. Yeah, and then as a potential app in the App Store. So we will follow up with you on this one as well. We just released our external product, and so there are already many users of Retool who've created apps for partners, franchises, and even like admin portals for their customers to go in and see usage of their product, and also be able to make changes to their account and interact with support. And so we can definitely follow up with you on this. I think one of the events that that Taylor mentioned, hosted by Anthony, that would also be a good one to join, about modernizing the tech stack, because a lot of what we're working on here should also apply to the external use cases. Next question. Suppose that I'd like to utilize Retool. Does it make sense that the business layer of a system to be scattered between Retool and the current tech stack, whatever it is? I think if I'm understanding this question correctly, it is around, can Retool kind of be that layer, which is similar to the first question, which is, yes, you can definitely continue to use your current systems and then use this as a layer for business analysts or developers to be able to build tooling on top of that. Cool. I'm a QA tester. How to carry out the testing in Retool? Can we integrate any tool with Retool? So on the testing piece, I think this question was asked before we talked about some of the things that we're working on. And so we're working on testing and observability. And so we'll have more to share soon on that. And we'll definitely follow up, because this was with this specific person who asked this question. And then in terms of integrating any tool with Retool, we have out-of-the-box connections that you could have with Retool, such as integrations with Stripe and different databases and APIs like Slack. But then anything that has an API, you're able to integrate that into Retool. Anything that has data, you're also able to integrate that. You can also pull the data over into Retool's Retool DB, which is our database, if you would like as well. Cool. Next question. Is the API available on the business plan? And then I believe that the APIs that we released today, these are part of the enterprise plan. And then can attributes be mapped from SSO? I believe the answer to that one is yes, but I guess Taylor, keep me honest here. But I think it should be part of user provisioning to be able to inherit some of the attributes over from your single sign-on provider. Cool. Those are the questions. I think there might be some other ones that we'll follow up on as well, but we have a running list of the questions, who asked them, and so we'll be able to follow up. And this session is also recorded, and so we'll be able to send you the recording to this as well. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone so much. If there's no other questions, we'll wrap for today. But yeah, thank you so much for coming to this event. Please keep an eye out for the other 2 events that Taylor teased during his section. And then you'll receive a recording for this. Thank you, everyone.